Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 244, Lysis 219d to 220a. Now that the like is allowed to be friendly to like, Socrates is able to form a chain of things which are friendly from one thing to the next, so that he can end in a particular friendly thing, which, if it is actually friendly, in other words, actually good, then all the other elements in the chain are also actually friendly. Fortunately for us, Socrates is now going to give us an example. We may observe that the boys hadn't asked for an example. They simply agree with anything Socrates says without critical thinking. En noeso men garhutosi. For let us consider in this way. Hotantisti peripolu poietai, hoion per eniote pater huon antipanton ton allon chrematon protima, hode toiutos henekatu ton huon peripantos hegestai, arcae alloti an peripolu poioito. Whenever someone values something very much, for example, sometimes a father honors a son above all other things, such a person, for the sake of considering the son above all, would he then value something else as well? Socrates has obviously chosen this example because Lysis and Menexenus are both sons of fathers, and it has already been established that the father of Lysis is someone who appreciates his son, even though he doesn't allow him to do anything in any of the technai without supervision. It's interesting that the son in this example is one thing among many things, and the father simply values this thing more than the other things. How is Menexenus supposed to react to that? Well, he doesn't react, as usual. The explanation so far has explained very little, so Socrates has to exemplify his example. Hoion aisthanoito auton koneon pepokota, ara peripo lupoi oitan oinon, per tuto higoito ton huon sosen. Timen fe. For example, if he sensed that that is, if the father sensed that his son had drunk hemlock, would he not value wine if indeed he thought that this would save his son? Of course, he said. This is an interesting choice for an example. Why would a son drink hemlock of all things? This is what Socrates drank as his punishment. It was an ideal method of capital punishment because no blood was spilt while doing it, and no person could be accused of murdering the victim afterwards because it was the victim himself who did the drinking. As for wine being an antidote for hemlock, I don't know of any source which says such a thing, but we do know that hemlock is a numbing poison. It makes the body feel cold, while wine is a warming liquid. So there may have been a medical theory that to counter cold entering the body, one should add warm. Socrates' rider here that if indeed the father thinks that wine would save his son, then he would cherish wine, he would value wine. So in one way, we may understand that Socrates himself thinks that wine wouldn't really help. And on the other hand, we also have to understand that wine only becomes valuable to the father if indeed he thinks it will save his son. In other words, the wine is something which will be considered friendly to the son. And we may understand that friendly is being used here instead of beneficial. The son is the thing for which the other things are beneficial. Socrates has long ago replaced agathon with philon, good with friendly. We should also be aware that the wine is good for the son only when the bad thing is present, the hemlock. Otherwise, wine should not be considered beneficial, although in fact wine was considered beneficial as something which softens the harshness, the hardness of water. The reply of Menexenus is interesting. He takes this in a matter-of-fact way. Of course, the father would value wine if he thought it would save his son from hemlock. It doesn't seem to bother Menexenus that this son would drink hemlock at all. Perhaps Socrates was trying to shock Menexenus into reacting more critically. Poisoning aristocratic boys isn't well attested, if at all, but there would always be a first time, and Menexenus should be worried about Socrates, since Socrates was the one who suggested it. Uk un kaito angeion, en hoho oinos eneie, panuge. So then the cup as well, in which the wine is, absolutely. It's interesting in all of these examples so far that Socrates hasn't said that they are friendly. He has only been saying that the father would value them. He values his son above all, and therefore he would value anything which would preserve his son, which means the wine and now also the cup holding the wine. I must say that on all the occasions when I have tried to save people who have drunk hemlock, I haven't really considered the vessel holding the remedy to be particularly valuable. Now that I think of it, of course, I would say I do need that cup in order to hold the remedy, which I also need in order to save the person who's drunk the hemlock. But it wouldn't occur to me naturally to think about the cup holding the wine. And yet, here we have Menexenus saying, absolutely. Menexenus clearly isn't imagining the scene, he's simply being carried away by the words. It sounds logical, so of course. This failure to put himself into the situation may be why Socrates now asks the next question. Arum tote uden peripleonos poietai, kulika keramean eton huon ton hautu, ude tres cotulas oinu eton huon. So does he then value nothing more, the clay cup more than his own son, nor the 3 cupfuls of wine more than the son? Menexenus had seemed to think that the father, anxious about his son who has just drunk hemlock, would value the cup. So Socrates is putting some pressure on here. Would the father actually value the cup more than his son? Just how much value would he be putting into this cup? Basically, we can already conclude that the things contributing to the safety or benefit of the final thing in the chain are of less value than the ultimate thing. Let's see what Socrates says. Ehode poseche, pasehe toelte spude, uk epitutois estin spudas mene, epitois henekatu paraskiuadzomenois, ale pequeno hu heneka pantata toyauta paraskiuadzetai. Or is it somehow this way? All such concern is not expended on the things prepared for the sake of something, but for the sake of that, for the sake of which all such things are prepared. In other words, all of the Father's concern is in his Son, not in the things prepared for the sake of his Son. It would not be the case then that at the moment of saving his Son, he values the wine and the cup holding the wine. This goes completely against what he's just said. This goes against what Menexenus said. He said absolutely. Now apparently it isn't so obvious. But we should all still agree that the wine and the cup are beneficial, if indeed they are beneficial, if indeed hemlock can be countered by wine, which obviously it can't. But the Father logically should think that the wine and therefore the cup are both beneficial. Menexenus doesn't react, of course, and Socrates carries on. Uchoti polakis legomen hos peripolu poiumetha chrysion kai argurion. Ala me udenti malon huto toke ale theseche, ale ke no estin ho peripantos poiumetha, ho anfane on hotu heneka kai chrysion kai pantata paraskiuadzomena paraskiuadzetai. Ar hutos fesomen? Panuge. Don't we often say that we value gold and silver? But the truth is rather not thus, but that thing which we value above all, whatever it might appear to be, for the sake of which gold and all the prepared things are prepared. Shall we say thus? Absolutely. Well done, Menexenus. I'm glad he's following the argument. What Socrates has actually been talking about really is means. All things are means. They are neutral. They are neither good nor bad until they are used for an end. If the end is good, they are good. If the end is bad, they are bad. Here the good things are valued. Elsewhere in the dialogue, the good things are friendly.